Okay. Good morning. The date today is the 30th of January 2023 and the time is exactly 11:37. We are doing crime risk perspective CMY 2601 learning unit 4.1 community management of high risk offenders. The table of contents, as you can see, introduction, key concept, risk versus right, ethical issues, community notification, South African situation, supervising and monitoring, evidence of effectiveness, conclusion, and self-assessment. Learning outcomes. Learning outcomes. When you have completed this module or this study unit, you should be able to explain the concept of high risk offender. Understand how the high risk offenders are managed in the community. Be familiar with the South African context. Recognize the effectiveness of managing high risk offenders. Assessment methods. After completing this study unit, you should be able to answer diverse multiple choice and paragraph type question in order to demonstrate you understand and knowledge of and insight into the study material. Introduction. Public protection against high risk offenders. Violent and sexual crime is a sensitive and contentious issue, attracting much media and political attention. Risk management and public protection fail elicit public outcry against probation options for high-risk offenders. Management of high-risk crime offenders entails, amongst other things, the use of restriction and surveillance and the prioritization of victim and community rights over those of offenders. Key concept: high risk offenders. Defining high risk offenders is not easy. Criminal offenders vary in their risk to reoffend. Low risk offenders. Few risk offenders refer to offenders who have lesser tendencies to reoffend and are minimal risk to the community compared to the high risk offenders. Many risk factors who are more likely to be placed in prison or subjected to close supervision if they are on parole. ANO SAH. High risk offenders often have an early onset of criminal behavior as well as antisocial as well as early onset criminal behavior as well as antisocial belief and personalities. In addition, they have long criminal history, substance abuse, poor family relations, and they are likely to be unemployed. Low risk offenders, on the other hand, are likely to have good jobs, good relationship with their families, a good relationship and social acquaintances, fairly pro-social attitudes, and limited criminal history, and few of any and few if any substance abuse problem. Low Camp and Latessa 2004 high risk offenders. For the purpose of the study unit refers to who committed violent or sexual offense. More attention will be paid to sexual offenses involving children in this discussion. Risks versus rights. Community management of high risk offenders, it's no easy task. The feeling of the community, fear in the first place, to feelings of indignation and outrage over hideous crime that has been committed. However, the community should know that the court consider it a priority to create living space where community members live and possessions are safe. Community interests play a prominent role. However, court outcome sentences do not always satisfy community expectations. As a result, vigilantism may be natural response, but this should be discouraged through community education. When a high-risk offender who have been released on parole commits a crime, tensions between the risk and the right of the offender arise. The authorities involved, such as politicians, courts, prisons, parole, and probation services, should maintain as their top priority a focus on public protection. The prisoner's right to be kept in prison or released on parole should be balanced under the European Convention, United Nations, and African Charter for Human and People's Rights, ANOL SAI. The public is entitled to community notification, that is, disclosure of information about sex offender, which indicates that the rights of community are more important than the rights of an offender. Cashel 2008, page 111. Sex offender registers originate in the United States of America. In 1944, laws required convicted sex offenders to register their names, address at their local police station. Juma 2008, page 29. In South Africa, the Sexual Offences Act came into operation in 2016. Came into operation on 16 December 2007, and Chapter 6 of this Act, which deals with sexual offenders register, is known as National Register for Sexual Offenders, NRSO. came into effect in 2009, June 16, 2009, being on the Sexual National Register for Sexual Offenders is not a sentence itself. A duration that a personal name will remain on the NRSO is determined by the sentence received. Section 51, subsection 1 of Act 32 of 2007. South African is staggering under crime. Which is confirmed by the release of the latest 2007-2018 crime statistics. Either 1,062 rape cases were reported, which are 362 cases more than the previous book year. Domestic violence, furthermore, represented 17,994 reported cases. Interesting information. Guidelines for parole boards when dealing with sexual offenders in South Africa. In cases of sexual assault for which a long term of imprisonment is imposed, the parole board must approach the trial court on its views regarding the possible placement of parole of such prisoner prior to making any recommendations. Two members from the community or any person who may provide meaningful input regarding a specific case may be invited by the chairperson to attend such parole hearing. When each prisoner attains his or her minimum detention period, a report must be submitted to the Minister, Commissioner, by the Parole Board in terms of Section 63 of the Correctional Services Act 8 of 1959, with regard to the prisoners. Department of Correctional Services, the following points need to be included in the report. 1. Conduct, adjustment, training, aptitude, physical and mental state, the possibility of such prisoner relapse into crime. When the minimum detention period has been served by the prisoner, the parole board must take a recommendation to the Minister, Commissioner, regarding the possible placement of such prisoner on correctional supervision or day parole or parolee. The parole board must recommend the condition and the period under which such prisoner should be released. In respect of sexual assault offenders, if parole is granted, stricter condition of parole and supervision must apply. For instance, if the prisoner was convicted of any offense or offenses that involve sexual abuse of children, the condition must be set that this person does not apply for work or volunteer for the work where children are at risk. The parole board must take any written representations relevant to the case of any person, including the victims, into consideration when placement on the parole is considered. When considering a prisoner's possible placement on parole, the parole must consider, amongst others, the following factors. Department of Correctional Service SA. Previous convictions and frequency thereof. Remarks, recommendations by the presiding judicial officer. Nature and circumstances of the crime committed. Support system in the community. The age and the sex of the victim as well as the prisoner's age. The relationship between the prisoner and the victim, motive for the crime, the exploitation of relation of trust, e.g. trusted family member or school teacher or friend, length of the sentence, crime, results of evaluations done by multi-professional team, risk posed to the community, risk to the victim or victim's immediate family, behavior and adjustment in prison, violation of previous conditions of supervisions or parole or suspended sentence. In respect of all sexual assault, the parole board must also take the following additional factors into account. Physical inquiries sustained by the victim, especially those which require hospitalization or prolonged intensive medical treatment. Emotional, psychological harm suffered by the victim, such when the victim was forced to take part in sexual act in front of family or friends, lack of regard for the physical condition of the victim, such as age, pregnancy, physical and mental illness. Or if the crime was committed in such a manner that it may cause future harm to the mental condition of the victim. When more than one offender committed sexual acts, such gang group rapes, whether weapons or any simulation weapon were used, when the victim was forced to perform unnatural sex acts, e.g. bestiality, sadism, a victim who indicates that he or she wishes to know when the prisoner will be placed on parole or released must give the investigating officer permission to write his or her name, address, ID number in a form SAP 62, in which it will remain the victim's responsibility to keep the Commissioner, Department of Correctional Services, address, inform his or her latest address. The Commissioner will inform the relevant parole board of the victim's particulars. The parole board must inform the victim in writing of the pending parole hearing, date of parole release, condition or unconditioned release of sexual offenders. The head of prison must furnish the copy of Form G373 of all offenders, irrespective of the offense committed, whether conditionally or unconditionally released to the South African Criminal Record Center. The head of community correction must send a sentence detail, date of placement, residential and work address, and the date of the sentence expire per letter to the South African Police Service nearest to the probation's parole area of residence for information. Prisoners released on parole remain under supervision until they have completed their sentence. A copy of Form G373 must be furnished to the Department of National Welfare in all cases where sexual offenders are placed on parole or released. For their information and disposal, Department of Correctional Services. Read more on the topic on the link below. Probation of non-custodial measure in Nigeria. There is a link. Also read about international acceptance of Megan Rule, laws that were created in response to the murder of Megan Kanka. The National Megan Law raised constitution concerns over sex offenders' rights. The website is written underneath, and then we move to ethical issues. Prediction of risk is challenging for prisoners, such as criminologists and social workers, who are tasked with risk assessment. Risk assessment tools can be fallibly stated by Monahan. The unreliability of risk assessment at the South African prison is clearly illustrated by the following example. A school teacher from Somerset West was attacked on the 19th of July 2010. She was threatened with knife and also threatened to be raped and murdered by a parolee. The victim alleged that the assault was a direct insult of the negligence of the Minister of the Correctional Service to release a high-risk offender on parole. The victim claimed damages in the amount of 1,332,000. On the 19th of March 2007, the judge ruled that the Minister of the Correctional should pay the cost of the action. Unknown 2017. Practitioners managing high-risk offenders will be required to balance the right and the safety of the victims and the public against the right of the safety of offenders. This is applicable where offenders reside near to or begin to groom, prepare for abuse. Children or potential victims. In essence, this means that offenders' right to privacy can be overridden to prevent further crime and to protect potential vulnerable victims, children, and the mentally disabled. The following legislation clearly illustrates the latter. In South Africa, any employee who works with children or mentally disabled persons should, without delay, disclose to the employee whether he or she convicted of sexual offense, irrespective of whether or not such offense was committed or alleged committed during the course of his or her employment. Department of Justice, Correctional Development, SA. Community notification. The United States of America and Europe have spearheaded registration and community notification legislation as a means of monitoring sex offenders and preventing recidivism. South African legislation does not make provision for notifying the community when the sex offender is released from prison. In South Africa, registers are established and maintained by the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. The register should contain the following information of the sexual offender: personal details, offender's title, full name including any known alias or nickname where applicable, the profession or trade, contact details, identity number, passport, driver's license where applicable, type of sexual offense which the offender has been convicted and whether or not it was committed against a child or a person who is mentally disabled, the sentence, as well as the relevant prisoner identification number where applicable, the court in which the trial took place, and the case number, the name of the medical institution or medical practitioner of a person, and the details of the sexual offense alleged committed by a person who has been alleged to have committed a sexual offense against a child or a person who is mentally disabled, in respect of whom a court has made a finding and given the direction that he, the offender, is mentally unfit to stand trial. Any other particulars, as many be prescribed by regulation. If the conviction and sentence took place in the foreign jurisdiction, contain as far as possible the equivalent information as obtained from the relevant country or any other legal source. Will members of the specific community be able to function normally if they receive multiple sex offender warnings? These members have to balance everyday life while at the same time trying to protect themselves and their families. The notification can also create the sense of control over the salient and frightening hazard in their environment. They may experience feelings of fear, anxious, and resentment, which are often intensified by the media. The combination between these factors can lead to vigilantism, where not only offender is targeted but also his family, friends, and other innocent people. When the community is notified, it can impede the right of the offender seeing that he has already been punished and also has a constitutional right to privacy. Cohen and Jacklin in Cashel 2008-115 identify 4 different notification models. The first model is based on 3-tier model of dangerousness: low risk, moderate, and high risk. The second model uses notification by a designated agency. The third model requires sex offender to carry out notification under the supervision of state agencies. In the fourth model, members of the community are required to make a request for information. The evaluation of the effectiveness of community notification in, in protecting children and communities against sexual offenders is difficult. Problems encountered are the following: implementing community registration, difficulties in enforcing registration and notification. Sex offenders are going underground, inaccurate information on registers, and draining of police resources. Kemshal 2008, page 116. 30 sex offenders who were interviewed indicated that stress, fear, and anxiety may precursors to relapse and may lead to high rates of recidivism. Zevith and Bakal in Kemshal 2008, page 117. Offender perception in community notification vary from, for example, Tewksbury and Lees 2007 and Keschel 2008, page 117, found that in their research, the offenders understood the rationale of sex offender register, but indicated that they would like to distinguish themselves from dangerous and predatory offenders. Sample and Bray in Keschel 2008-117 found that sex offenders have different rearrest patterns and also different level of risk. Sex offenders indicated that the length of registration had a negative influence on treatment seeking and rehabilitation. Registration also led to social destigmatization, loss of employment, relationship, housing, physical assault, and harassment. Food for thought. According to Department of Justice and Correctional Development, South Africa legislation makes provision for the following sexual offences against children and persons who are mentally disabled: rape, compelled rape, sexual assault, compelled sexual assault, compelled sexual assault, self-sexual assault, acts of consensual sexual penetration with certain children, statutory rape, acts of consensual sexual violation with a certain children, statutory assault, compelling or causing children to witness sexual offences, sexual acts, or self-masturbation, exposure or display of causing exposure, display of the genital organs, anus, and female breast to children, sexual exploitation of children, persons who are mentally disabled, sexual grooming of children and persons who are mentally disabled, exposure or display or causing exposure or display to child pornography or pornography to children or persons who are mentally disabled, using children or persons who are mentally disabled for pornographic purposes and benefiting therefrom. Department of Justice and Correctional Development. The South African situation. The Sex Offender Register is a system designed to allow government authorities to keep track of activities of sex offenders, including those who completed their criminal sentence. South African National Register Sexual for Sexual Offenders has been operating since June 2009. In terms of the criminal law, Sexual and Related Matters Amendment Act 2007, the register is administered by the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. The information contained in the National Register of Sex Offenders is not available to the public. The primary aim of the register is to prohibit sexual offenders from being able to be employed in work involving children and mentally disabled persons. Food for thought. It is a well-documented fact that sexual offences worldwide are not reported regularly. South African National Prosecuting Authority publishes conviction rates for the broad categories of sexual offences. However, despite requests, it has not provided a disaggregated conviction rate for rape. Without this data, it is impossible to say which percentage of rape cases ends in conviction each year. Furthermore, conviction rates are not a reliable measure of success of the justice system. According to the official 2018 South African crime statistics, rape cases from 49,660 reported cases in 2007 to 50,108 in 2018, an increase of 0.9%. The rise in reported rape cases coincide with the findings by Dobiasis and Brook 2007, which state that for many rural women, their first sexual encounter will be forced one. Following figures may also be influenced by non-reporting of rape incidents. The incidences of non-consensual first sexual experiences are indicated by the following percentage. Some 17% of women in rural areas, Tanzania, 21% of Ghana, 24% of Peru, 30% of Bangladesh, and 40% in South Africa. At least 46 children are raped every day, and at least 2 children are murdered every single day in South Africa. Only 21% of children rape cases and only 1 in 3 murder cases results in successful conviction, according to Zakhele Mpele, DA Shadow Minister of Police. Activity. Not all crimes are reported by police. This is a known dark figure of crime. Read the following newspaper article and give reasons why women do not report rape incidents. Okay? This is in Cape Town. And then we read. Okay, the first paragraph goes, Cape Town. In one of 3 cases of men of God accused of raping their congregants, a Philippine mother says the justice system has failed by dropping her case. She had complained to the police of repeated rapes, by her pastor. The 29-year-old has spoken out for the first time, detailing to Cape Times her long ordeal over 4 years. The traumatized woman said she had opened a case in August 8, but at the end of the month it was dropped. She said recently the case televangelist Timothy Motoso was part of the reason she decided to report it. A 60-year-old televangelist is on trial, accused of trafficking more than 30 girls and women from branches of his church to a house in Umhlanga, KwaZulu-Natal, where he is accused of sexually exploiting them. The Philippi woman said she went to the House of Glory Ministers Church in her area to find a place of healing as she was depressed after losing her mother. She alleged that a bishop of the church repeatedly raped her, but officials ignored her case. The first time he raped me, I was staying in another church member's house because I had no place to stay. He came into the room around 2 a.m., got into the bed, and got a fright when I felt someone in the bed next to me. I woke up and asked him what he was doing. He was forcefully trying to kiss me, and next thing I knew, he was on top of me. She said she did not tell anyone about the incident, fearing that she would not be believed. People always said he was such a good man, and I would feel sick to my stomach because I thought to myself, no good man would do what he did to me. She said she opened up about the rape after finding out she was pregnant. I went to many people for advice, but I found out that everyone was just protecting him. People would say that he would never do anything like that. I became tired of that and eventually went to the police. I saw that these people were not trying to help me. Police spokesperson Andy Trout said the case was investigated, but it was later withdrawn by the senior state prosecutor on the 30th of August because of insufficient evidence. National Prosecutor Authority spokesperson Eric Ntabazilali said the prosecutor declined to prosecute as the state would not be in a position to successfully prosecute the matter. This as Omosanto, who faced 63 charges which include human trafficking, rape, sexual assault, racketeering, and conspiracy aiding another person to commit sexual assault, appeared in Port Elizabeth High Court yesterday. His lawyer, Peter Domberman, was harassed and followed to his car by a group of angry protesters, Dwyer 2008. Feedback on activity. If your answer, you can list some of the following reasons why rape is not reported: shame, denial, fear of consequences, e.g., retaliation by the perpetrator, low self-esteem, feelings of hopelessness, helplessness. Supervising. Supervising and monitoring are seen as essential for effective monitoring of high-risk offenders once released from prison. Global positioning. Electronic monitoring has been used in the USA to counter registration, non-compliance, and to track offenders who go underground. Kensha 2008, page 123. Supervision can also enhance offenders' accountability, responsibility for their actions, and facilitate review of progress. Melo 2005, Cashel 2008, page 124, studied 917 sex offenders on probation and found that social controls, committed partner and stable accommodation with social support ensure a success on probation. In 2012, the South African Department of Correctional Services implemented a pilot project on the Electronic Management System, EMS. Electronic monitoring works by attaching a tag the size of a watch around an individual ankle. This ankle monitor is used for people who have been sentenced to electronic monitoring by court or are required to wear a tag upon release from prison. The tag contains a transmitter that sends the signal to a receiver, which subsequently sends information via phone line to a central computer. The receiver has set range, which usually the perimeter of an individual house. When the tag is taken outside of the range, the receiver, there will be a break in a signal, and this information is relayed to the central computer and subsequent processed by an officer. Scheme 2017. By the end of the project, 288 offenders had been tagged. The full EMS had rolled out in July 2014 with the tagging of 511 offenders. In 2018, 748 out of a national target of 1,000 offenders have been tagged. The Western Cape and Limpopo, Mpumalanga Northwest region have both exceeded their targets. A central control room monitored all movements 24 hours a day, and the alerts, e.g., if convicted pedophile went within the certain distance of a school or crash. The local police, for a rapid response, arresting the parolee. It enabled much quicker detection than physical monitoring and could be used to corroborate alibis when new crime occurred. Evidence of effectiveness. Emerging studies sound a caution on the evidence emanating from the community management of high-risk offenders. Areas for caution are the negative impact of community notification, restrictive condition, and costly supervision. Solutions to the problem differ. Often more attention is paid to the victim and community's end less to offender. In essence, this means that the impact of community protective legislation does not always lead to decrease in recidivism. Kemshall, 2008 125, is of the opinion that there is a paucity of evidence of the effectiveness of studies and that such studies are on a small scale. Hence, this is an area that would benefit from future research. Activity 2. Read the following case study. Your neighbor's 7-year-old daughter had been raped in a bathroom of a well-known family restaurant. The perpetrator, a previous sexual offender who also lived in the same neighborhood as the victim, was out on parole when the alleged rape took place. The community protested against the attack by marching to the court where the alleged offender appeared. Now, test the reaction of two friends, relatives, and neighbors by asking them the following questions. Would the community be willing to allow the offender to return to the neighborhood? No. Talk to the community members in order to test their reaction on the matter. Would the community be willing to become part of the restorative justice initiative, reconciliation rather than punishment? List your reasons pertaining to the yes or no answer. Feedback. Activity 2. Reflect on how you will respond to the likelihood that the perpetrator will return to the neighborhood after released from prison. Is it true that Ubuntu is the core human value, and without Ubuntu, mankind is wrapped in pride, selflessness, immorality? Apply the Ubuntu principle when preparing your answer. Conclusion. Community management of high-risk offenders in South Africa is not yet well-established practice. However, the establishment of a national safe sex offender register will assist in identifying and monitoring pedophiles, which is a long run will not only contribute to the crime prevention but also to the decrease of recidivism. Self-assessment. Okay, I will do the self-assessment on my own. Here is the question. High-risk offender can be identified as. For the 4 answers, we choose one. Okay, question 2. Question 3. Question 4. Question 5. And question 6. These are written self-assessment questions. And Danko, we done now. Thank you.